This week on Two Way for Today, we're sharing a recent interview that I had with Matt Shea, host of Patriot Radio in Washington State. What a great chat. Make sure to add Patriot Radio to your daily freedom diet. We talked gun rights, we talked the recent mass shooting, and we talked some solutions to protecting yourself from the constant encroachment of our would-be globalist overlords. Welcome to Two Way for Today.
All right, it's my honor right now to bring on a Patriot Radio for the first time. And we're going to talk about a couple of great issues here. Zoe Warren, he's a filmmaker, freelance video producer, documentarian, and journalist who's been producing commercial, narrative, and news content since 2009, but a special emphasis on guns today. Zoe, it's great to have you on Patriot Radio. How are you doing, my friend?
Thank you, sir. I'm honored, to be perfectly honest with you. I am supremely honored to be on with Matt Shea. You know, you're actually the subject of part of my next documentary. So this is kind of providential for me. When I saw your name, I was like, what? This is going to be awesome.
Wow. Usually when somebody says they're doing a documentary about me, I don't know, it's usually not a positive one. So, well, thank you.
We have mutual friends. So we have mutual friends, and I think it's great, man, that I get to be on the program with you today. And I really enjoyed your message on the gospel and what it really means, and so I really appreciate that as well.
Well, thank you, and the honor is mine, and I thank you for taking the time to be on with us today and talk about some of these issues. One of the most controversial issues today is guns. We had a mass shooting the other night, and it's just, it seems like it's once a week now. And then the drumbeat is out there. We've got to get rid of guns. We got to curtail firearms rights and all these things. I just want to give you just a wide open canvas right now. Paint the picture. What are you seeing? What are some of the stories you're hearing right now here in America that our listeners and everybody watching should know?
Well, I'm really actually encouraged. We are upwards of, we're at almost to 50% plus one of constitutional carry states, some form of constitutional carry. Some of them aren't fully constitutional. It's like, open carry with infringement or concealed carry with infringement. So you can conceal carry, but you can't open carry without a permit, or you can open carry, but you can't conceal carry without a permit. But there's some form of carrying you can do of a sidearm without needing the permission from the government, as long as you're not a violent felon, or there's no legal reason why you shouldn't be able to carry a firearm, and it has nothing to do with the color of law. It has to do with you actually having violated some criminal statute. And so I'm really encouraged. There's several decisions that have been handed down too in the recent months, even like the Bruin decision, New York State Pistol Association versus Bruin, that are just helping us to roll back the infringement. Some of these infringements have been here for 60 years or more. Things that are related to serial numbers and things that the ATF is essentially creating out of thin air. They think they have the power of Congress to write legislation. They'll just write a policy, and their ATF head will give it to the DOJ, and Merrick Garland will sign it or whatever, and then it's law or whatever. I don't know how they do it, but they're getting to the point where they just want to make things happen whenever they want to make it happen. But all those things are getting shut down. We have jurisprudence that is in keeping with the Constitution now. And so I'm encouraged, man. We're going the right direction as far as gun rights is concerned. However, I think we still need some gun knowledge. If we're going to have a right, that means we have to have a responsibility. There's no right that doesn't come with a responsibility. If you don't keep up your responsibility, then you will lose your right. That's just the way it works. Every right comes with a duty. And so I think that now we need to begin to emphasize more training, more education, an educated populace. Not that there should be a requirement to own, but it should be high on the list of what we encourage and discourage just kind of, lawlessness and wanton use of firearms. But I'm really excited about the future right now. So
I am excited about the future as well, because, the constitutionalists on the Supreme Court finally said, hey, listen, we need to go back and look at what the original intent was here, and we need to apply the standard as the founders understood it at the time. I mean, there was not widespread, magazine bans. There was not widespread, permitting and all these there was none of that back then. And so I know that a lot of the folks on the left are in a panic about this, and they keep trying to make it a moral issue. And I'd like you to weigh in a little bit on both of those things. First, the implications of the Supreme Court decision, just practically for most Americans. And secondly, how do we articulate the morality of having the ability to defend ourselves and those people around us from evil?
Well, I would argue that there's no, I'm going to answer your second one first, morality first, and then I'll go to practicality. And morally, I would say there's no better candidate to bear the sword than a just person, right? Mm. And so when I look at Romans 13, his ministers bear the sword, Paul wasn't saying that it was going to be the heathen forever and ever, amen. The people who bear the sword get their authority, they derive it from God. And so that means that when they're doing the work against evildoers, they are doing the work of God. They are avengers against the work of evildoers. And evil doing is pretty obvious. It's trespassing other people, because fulfillment of the law is loving your neighbor as yourself. And so it's very simple, And so whenever there is a person bearing the sword that is unjust, that is doing evil with it themselves, they are illegitimately using the authority they have. And so they themselves are also subject to the law. So with that said, there's no better person than a just person bearing the sword, right? So good people, moral, religious people who the Constitution was actually designed to govern, it can't govern anyone else. And everybody else is going to have to have the minutia of state laws that, tie their hands because they trespass people and put them in jail or fine them or whatever the case is, because they won't love their neighbors as themselves. Moral and religious people, and I would argue that you don't necessarily have to be a religious person to be moral, although most of your morals will be derived from a religious mindset, or at least won't disagree with it. And so you don't have to necessarily know God to be taught of him and by people that know him what is good and just and right. And so moral and religious people that's the subject of the Constitution. Those are the people that have liberties that need to be protected. People who are going to trespass other people, that we have the law to deal with them too. And so morally, it only makes sense that just people will be bearing the sword. I mean, the Supreme Court has said on 7 occasions that, the police officers have no duty to protect anyone not in their custody. That means there's a gaping hole in between, defending ourselves and our ability to defend ourselves if we allow gun control. Because, there were violent mobs destroying entire city blocks, attacking families, burning things to the ground, killing people for that matter. And for me, what's reasonable is an AR-15, because I want to be able to have a rifle that has stopping power that can hit people at a distance, that can carry a certain amount of rounds, just in case it's a mob attacking my family or my neighbors for that matter, And so it's reasonable to me to have a rifle that has power that can do that. And so some other person that may not be reasonable. Why should your understanding of what's reasonable play into my understanding of what's reasonable? I'm a free person. I'm a moral religious person. I'm not trying to violate any laws. Your discretion should have nothing to do with mine. So there is no moral reason, I believe, that a person with individual liberties that has not broken the law should have anyone else determining what's reasonable for them. And so it's immoral to me for you to come into my house and tell me how to take care of my children and how to do whatever. But most of our opponents, they are immoral that way. They don't even think parenthood should be a thing. And so there, as far as the Supreme Court practicality is concerned, Alexander Hamilton said that when our representatives fail us, that we can all resort to the original right of self-defense. And there is no better means to defend yourself that have a sidearm or a rifle that can do that. And it's unfathomable to me that our founders would actually live in this society we're in right now without being enraged. I mean, pitchforks and torches 20 years ago, for that matter. I mean, Vermont was the first constitutional carry state, 1792. It's in their constitution. You haven't had to have permission to keep and bear arms in Vermont since, the Constitution was ratified almost. And so the U.S. Constitution. So with that said, the Supreme Court is really, in a practical sense, just bringing us back to reality, because we had a departure from reality for a short period, and now we're getting back to the reality. And so that's how I would see it.
That's really good. The reality, because the Marxists, using the Hegelian dialectic, try to create a fake reality. I mean, they that's exactly what they're doing. They're creating an alternate reality. Now, I want to just mention one thing really quick. This is why I believe they're saying now, you see such, it's just overt racism by leftists now and Marxists, because now they're saying just the color of my skin determines whether I'm just or not. This gets back to your original point about, a just person is the best repository for these things, that now just by how I was born, that determines how just I am. I would like to get your reaction to that.
Yeah, that's their scheme. It's just a tactic. And anybody who kind of can benefit from that tactic, if they, just want to win, they'll take it up. It's just a bludgeon. It's hypocrisy as strategy. They would cry about racism and then,
I guess that happens.
Employ racism.
Yeah, and employ it in all these different ways. Yeah, and under guises of some sort of academic theory, yeah. Well, okay, we've got a video here I want to play for you and get your reaction to this. Travis, go ahead and cue the video.
So here's what we figured out. All of a sudden, around the beginning of the year, YouTube silently changed its guidelines when it comes to firearms. In the new guidelines, you're not allowed to add prohibited accessories onto a firearm in the video. And so what do I mean by silently, and what exactly is a prohibited accessory? Well, whenever I say silently, I mean that they didn't actually tell anybody that they updated the guidelines. And so all of a sudden, people just started getting flagged. Well, after a little bit of digging, we figured out that it was adding on these prohibited accessories. So what exactly is a prohibited accessory? Unfortunately, they don't exactly tell us that either. They give us this list, which is homemade suppressors, full auto things, and crazy stuff like that, which none of us really did anyhow. But then at the bottom of the list, they said this is not a full list.
Huh. So a prohibited accessory could be, I don't know, a new trigger, could be, I don't know, a flashlight? I don't know. I want your reaction to this. Yeah, what do you think?
It's not surprising to me. We have NGOs and private organizations and media companies that are essentially working together to create lists and labels, and they provide lectures to law enforcement. And so we have a whole lot of disciplinary action being employed by corporations. It's very fascist. It's very you private ownership, but complete government control, because if you don't do what we say, then we'll do something to you. And so it's maybe diet fascism, So I expect these corporations to fall in line and serve their overlord, their global overlords, because they think these crazy Americans who these plebeians, who think that they can choose their representation and make law and know how the government works. We're the patricians. We're the luminists. We know what's best for you. We're selfless. We're doing it for the greater good. And so if you don't abide by our agenda, then we'll cancel you. You won't have access to X, Y, and Z. That's why I'm so concerned with digital money and all that nonsense, is because, they just, I'm not nothing against Bitcoin. I'm concerned about things people can just turn off. I like gold. You can't turn it off. And I'm not against Bitcoin. I'm not trying to go to that discussion. I'm just saying I get concerned about the government being able to say, Zoe, I know you're black, but you got some internalized white supremacy, so I'm just going to take your money and I'm going to subtract about 25% of it. That way you have less buying power, and you'll learn.
Yeah, I was kind of sensing that from you, right? Yeah, then they just zero your account out. I want to talk about this quickly since you brought up central bank digital currency. I really believe, and I've talked to people that are at the head of the banking industry that have said this, that Bitcoin was really something that was supposed to condition us to accept it. But anything, like you said, that has one point of entry, one point of exit, and some benevolent bureaucrat controls that valve, how can that possibly? I mean, that seems like that is actually the definition of slavery to me. I can't get my money when I want to. It's my money, not yours. But I didn't meet your criteria of the social credit score, and I can't get my money. I agree with you. I think something I can hold in my hand with my rifle in front of me, that's real. That's something that means something. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Seeds. I mean, they can produce, and I'm not trying to say we should go back to cart and buggy and all that stuff, but, I think it may be wise to pick up a 1976 Ford F-150, because they're trying to put these computers in your car too, so they'll shut you down. No, Zoe, you're going around those white supremacists too much. I think we're going to need to slow you down a little bit.
Well,
I'm not in for that.
Right. Well, let me ask a question about that. I mean, how have you been treated when you've brought up some of these issues, just like the right to bear arms, right? This should not be a partisan issue, shouldn't be a socioeconomic issue, shouldn't be a racial issue. It's the right to bear arms. Everybody should have it because we are made in the image of God, period, end of story. How have you been treated when you've talked about these issues?
I make it a race issue. And I make it a race issue because I'm like, listen, black folks have only had the right to carry sidearms publicly for a short period, guys. And you're going to now try to take that away from us. The same people who prevented us from having firearms in the beginning, that same party whose democratic will, because you got the majority vote, can trespass my individual liberties, God-given liberties, that kind of stuff that you're doing to, unborn babies, you did to slaves, you did during Jim Crow, that democratic will, just because you got the majority vote, it don't fly with me. And you're not going to get a pass simply because you want to give black people reparations. It's the Democrat Party. It's because you think you can do whatever you want if you got the majority vote. And I say, nay, verily. And I can actually pick up a lot of black folks because I even go back to the Black Panthers. I don't agree with their racial philosophy. However, they taught the young men to be men. They took care of their vulnerable, the widows and the orphans in their community, and they taught them how to carry their rifles and disassemble them, gun safety. And they took care of their community. I'd say the same thing even with the Klan. I don't agree with their race philosophy, and I tell black people this too. But, I mean, listen, if a man was beating his wife, he lived in a house on the corner, he was beating his wife, the Klan would go to his house and say, hey, buddy, we heard you've been beating your wife, you're drinking, you're not working, you better get it together. We'll be back in 2 weeks. And 2 weeks later, they would be back. And if he didn't have it together, they would tie his white butt to a stump and whip it. Now, I'm not trying to say we should go around whipping our neighbors. However, if I call DSS on that family, I've ruined that family forever. Because even if that guy gets filled with the Holy Spirit, starts speaking in tongues, traveling the world, laying hands on the sick, and they're getting up from the dead, he can't go home because she might lose her kids. And so there's a disconnect from reality, and the government is that disconnect. Generally speaking, most of the problems we face come from too much government. And so we need to reduce government, and especially when it comes to self-governing with the right to keep and bear arms. I'll protect myself, my family, and my neighbors. We'll call the police to write reports. How about that?
Why not that simple, right? So, I've noticed too, coming into the United States of America, different people groups. I mean, for me, the Scottish and the Irish, we had our swords taken away in the 1670s from the Irish penal laws. And then they come to America, and all of a sudden, I can have the right to bear arms. I can have the right of self-defense. I am never letting this go ever again. The Slavic peoples that were persecuted in the former Soviet Union, the underground church there, came to the United States, and many of them, not all of them, but many of them embraced the right to bear arms because they suddenly understood, hey, wait a minute, somebody can invade our country if just the army has guns. If all of us have guns, that kind of can be a deterrent to that. In fact, in the 1960s, in the Kennedy administration, they actually had that. It was actually a strategic policy that every American have firearms as a strategic deterrent to Russia, to China. So I want to get your take on that part of it as well. That this isn't maybe even just necessarily a family thing, but this is actually a national security thing.
Absolutely. 100%, man. Right now, Montana, being like one of the least population states, if they actually did what the law says, the code, and they had, every male over, I think 16 or 18 and under 45, if they were automatically, enlisted and trained as the militia, they would have an army, like the third largest army in the world, just by virtue of doing what the law already says. What we've done is we've violated reality. The founder said these truths we find to be self-evident. And I agree. After doing these experiments over time and watching them decimate other countries, it's self-evident why they said that for the security of a free people, that the militia is necessary. And the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Why? Because we need to be prepared. I mean, it's the dumbest thing in the world that we have a standing army. I mean, our founders are like, listen, you can have a navy, but you're going to have to raise armies because it's harder to invade your own country from the water. But now I'm not trying to say our Army, our Navy, our Marines would do anything like that. What I am saying is that we have come to depend on this idea way too much. And so now we even have the military becoming this socialist social experiment where, look at the generals, man. They're wearing mini skirts and they got their legs crossed and they're LGBTQ pronouns. I'm like, what are you doing, guys? Just get ready for war, okay? just get trained but we have these Marxist university professors that are infiltrating everything. And so small government, keeping it in its place, our founders were smart. They knew what would help us stay free. Our American form of republic, stay the American form of republic, not be hijacked and turned into some other form of republic. And I pray that we get more elected representatives that will get into office, that will preserve the American form of republic. Our government's supposed to be inefficient as a hindrance and a obstacle, an impediment to despotism.
Amen. And that allows all of us to be the tongue talking and healing the sick and delivering those that are tormented by demons, folks, preaching the gospel of the kingdom all over the world. When government is out of the way, the church just is free. It's unleashed. And that's where we should really be leading around the world, is with the church and our businesses, not with the point of a gun. But we should have an army that actually is ready to protect us. I don't know about you, but I've seen some stuff in the news recently, and I'm like, I was in the military. I was in the Army for 10 years, and I'm seeing some stuff, and I'm like, man, what happened? It seems like that if China just blew on us, we would fall over. And I don't speak that into existence. I just pray right now that the military has life in it and gets the bearings again, that is pointed in the right direction to protect this great country that God has given us.
Yeah. I'm troubled by a lot of things that I see, and I think that we've been way too interventionist, and so we've grown super top heavy. As a consequence, we've allowed war hawks and people that kind of want to jump in every conflict to generate some income to lead the country, and so it's difficult to roll back some of those things. It's almost like in order to change it, you almost have to look like you're an enemy of it when you're not. Like they tried to slime Ron Paul that way back during his campaign when he was running for president. He was just making sense. If you're going to go over there and be interventionist, you're going to create your enemies, and that's just the way it works. There's children that whose parents you killed are going to come looking for you. So I don't know how you get around that. And so anyway, I hopefully, God willing, we can get some common sense back into our legislative processes, our executive processes. Just rolling back the APA would be a start. Just get the agencies out of the business of writing policies that have the force of law would be great. So maybe we can start there.
That's going to be a separate show for you and I on the Administrative Procedures Act. Thank you for bringing that up, but we don't have time right now. We've only got about a couple minutes left. So in the last 2 minutes, where can people follow you, follow what you're doing, and where can they read and see what you are producing?
Yeah, I host a show called 2A for Today, and 2A for Today is a program where we explore all things Second Amendment, all things that protect, threaten, and violate the God-given right to keep and bear arms, Second Amendment protected right. of all Americans. And if you go to thenewamerican.com, you can go to videos tab and you'll see my mug. Or if you just type in 2A for Today on Google and Zoe, Z-O-E, you'll also find our program. I was working with a group called Center for Self-Governance, who you'll recognize that name. And we have a documentary that first part is out. It's called The Final Verdict. And the final verdict covers the Oregon trials, and it should be released in the next 30 days. And then part 2 is going to be the Nevada trials, and that involves Wooten, the whistleblower, and a man who I give all honor to. I'm so honored to be on his show today. That was instrumental in helping this overreach of the federal government to be exposed in a massive way. And I just thank God for your work, bro.
Thank God for yours. Well, blessings and thank you. And we're going to have you on again. Really appreciate it. And you can, call us and let's talk anytime. I can give you kind of the backstory behind what really happened the day the whistleblower memo showed up. So anyway,
let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it. God bless you, Zoe Warren, here on Patriot Radio. You can follow him on 2A for Today. Go to thenewamerican.com. If you've heard that on this show many times, go there. Don't wait. Zoe, thanks so much for joining me today. God bless you. Keep up the fight.
That concludes our program for today. If your right to keep and bear arms is important to you, make sure to subscribe to the New American Magazine and get on the top daily headlines mailing list so that you get an email alert anytime that we upload a video or stream a live event. And share these videos with your family and friends. You've been watching 2A for Today. My name is Zoe. Thank you for watching 2A for Today.
They say I'm part of a global plan. I don't think so. It's too hot, it's too cold. You know what? The weather changes.
Here's the news, Dad.
Nope. It's hard to tell what's real and what's fake these days.
Ditch the fake news and always get the truth. Go to thenewamerican.com.